Well, welcome to the webinar, 12 proven shortcuts and techniques for creating outstanding training and procedural assets. I'm Nigel Wilson, and I'm going to take you through some slides today and a little bit of software and some examples of good work and not so good work, and talk about different ways that we can actually produce better results for us as the creators of the content and for the ultimate audience of this, the users of the software for which we're creating the instructions and training materials. So let me turn off the video and turn to my screen here, and let's get going. All right. I did ask AI to help here, and I'll let you pause and read through this in the video later if you want to do so. I'm not going to go through this. I just wanted to point out that I don't think it was overly useful. There are some things in here, and any given thing in here is actually quite good. And please use plain language and enjoy or avoid jargon. Fair enough. Use readable fonts and colors. Fair enough. And these are all such simple things. What I wanted to do, however, was something a little bit different and group together lots of different things that we've learned over the years into 12 topic areas and then to talk through those. And so we have a dozen slides of content and just one finishing slide after this one, which is now slide 4. All right, so the first thing on the list is make it clear. What's that about? I mean, surely it's clear. It's always clear, isn't it? But it isn't. This actually takes a bit of work, getting the title of the document right, followed by very, very quickly at the top of any given document or asset, video or whatever, who's it for, what's it about, when does it apply, what are the trigger events for it, why are we doing it, things like that, and then get into the how. And it's surprising how often we kind of break this simple pattern. An example might be something like this, which is coming up on your screen now. Here you have edit or delete an opportunity stage name in Salesforce. So what I really wanted to point out with this document is there's this unfortunate inconsistency between the title of this document and what it actually does. We're not editing stage names, we're editing stages, and we're not editing and deleting. We're creating and changing, we're adding and changing and adding and changing and deleting, but it doesn't quite match the heading. And so something as simple as that can make it difficult to find this document, and then it adds a fair bit of discomfort for the user to work out what's going on. However, what this does do is in the description section here, it does point out who can do the job, which is very good because we need to know who that is. That they can add and change and replace names and delete the names. So as I mentioned, it's not just the names, it's the actual objects, but at least the structure of this document with a description. And finally, we get into the steps itself, which is the how. And we have some explanations through here and some succinct steps. And we're going to come back and talk about those later, but not a great heading. At least it's got this supportive information in it, so you can see that you're in the right place, right? So title, who, what, when, where, why, and finally how. Make it clear from the start. Next, one topic, one article. This is pretty important as well, right? Well, what does that even mean? Well, it means don't try and cram everything into one long asset, be that a web page, a video, a Word document, or if you are going to cram lots and lots of stuff into the document, make sure you structure it properly, but basically don't try and separate out the pieces. Not like this. So here we have an asset from Google. Good heading, which is great. It's exactly what this is about. It could be argued that you might want to separate, add, and remove, but I think they make sense here together. A nice little gray box here indicating what's going on or what you might else you have to refer to. And then they get reasonably quickly into a video, and this video actually shows the procedural steps. So the document almost should just finish at that point, but it goes on, I mean, and it puts in a ton of supportive information that may or may not be necessary. And this provides, I think, a fair bit of cognitive overload as well. It's like, do I need to read this? And that, do I need to know about this? And eventually you get down to procedural steps. So we've got a video at the top with procedural steps, and then we get, well, a fair bit of the way down the page, 3/4 of the way down the page, and we have procedural steps. And so it's not well designed. There's a lot of load your mind has got to deal with before you work out exactly what's going on, and maybe that other stuff isn't just applicable to you. So one topic per article. And if you do need to put everything on the page like they've done here, make it very clear and put in a table of contents at the top so it's easy to find what you're looking for, not like the example we've just seen. Okay, in a similar vein, structuring our work. Headings and content organization are going to make a big difference. The previous slide I just showed you really doesn't do that. And you don't have to overwork this. You don't have to over-engineer it. This example here, this is one of ours that we wrote just a few days ago, few days ago. Title, what this is about, the information about templates, important information about this section here, and then visual instructions. So it doesn't prescribe. It doesn't. We're not prescribing sort of a definite pattern of special accurate headings or anything. I'm just saying that the structure, putting in these titles, makes a big difference to the user's experience of being able to get the job done. And it's a good idea to put in conclusion, finally, end of procedure, now do this at the end of the document with an equivalent level heading to the rest of it. So you can see the procedure has ended. I mean, you wouldn't just leave it at the end of step 19. You could, but you shouldn't. So these little tips here, they make a big difference to the user's experience. This one here, this is a little bit different. This is, I suppose, stepping it up a bit more. This is HTML, but the steps are inside of these little boxes. So the idea here is, rather than just headings, you could use this run-through instruction output, or you can do it yourself if you're handcrafting HTML, so that these little guys can pop open or close as you navigate to the appropriate section. So you don't have all the clutter on the page. You can quickly rip around the page and move between sections. Sort of like a table of contents, but it's a bit better because you don't have to scroll back up to the top of the page to navigate. And so this is something you can do very simply in HTML. It really is just another output choice inside of run-through instruction for HTML, but you could handcraft it should you wish to do so. So that's also a good example. This one here is a bit different. We also made this in a different software application. This is Runthru Performance. But if you can see what's going on here, we've got procedural steps with graphical elements next to them, which is really quite cool. It's just a visual treatment of content, kind of like a flowchart, but vertical. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about separating potentially unnecessary steps from the necessary steps. So let's say here, confirm that the check has not been presented. If it's no, as in the red cross, just proceed, which means there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in here that you don't need to look at if the choice is no. But we might need it, so let's put a little link to it. So we proceed to dishonor check, so we'll have to do these things. And it just happens to be down the bottom of this one page. Could be somewhere else, just happens to be down the bottom of the page. So all this is doing is just organizing your content, and that makes an enormous difference for the person who's reading the page, because they don't have to scroll through a bunch of stuff that's not necessary for them. Next, choose the appropriate level of detail. How much detail do you really need? Well, those of you who know us know that we really like screenshots, because that gives the user supreme comfort that they're in the right place, on the right screen, in the right application, in the right tab, in the right part of the screen. They can see exactly where things are because they're so clearly labeled, because you've drawn arrows and rectangles with numbers attached to them and separate text. So we really like screenshots, but in many cases, you shouldn't use screenshots. So why wouldn't you use screenshots? Well, you just don't need to. And if you don't need to, don't do it, because it's a lot quicker to not do it for us as the creators. So we're not going to be puristic about this and say you've got to use pictures every time. Here's an example where you don't use pictures. This is technical stuff for technical people. It doesn't need pictures. Well, all you're bringing up is a console box anyway, a command prompt. So you don't need a picture of that. And you're typing text into a black box, so you don't need a picture of that. So don't do it. The other thing I really like about this is whoever's written this knows their audience. Here it says, open an elevated command prompt and do this. If you're an IT professional, you know exactly what that means and you don't need it prescribed. In fact, I go so far as to say, if you do need this described to you, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So it is horses for courses. That is design suited to the audience. It's solely text. Very good. Big green tick. This one is I'm less sure about. So this is a ServiceNow example. Here we've got on this page a clear heading, set the on-click behavior report, good enough. And then you've got a bit of a description here as to what it's going to do, also good. And then you've got who is it for, also good. And then a little bit about the task as well. Very good. And then you've got a procedure. And again, this suits the audience. A menu, navigate to all reports, view and run. And then here are some instructions. And there's little pictures of icons, which are also kind of cool here, very, very helpful. And an optional step here, also very helpful. So this is good stuff. The collision here comes for me when seemingly under select save, there's this animation. And this is an animated GIF. These are little files, they're a little bit tricky to make, and they loop. So it just goes round in a circle and it shows you all the steps at rapid speed. And I would suggest that this style doesn't suit this sort of content. In fact, animated GIFs aren't great for most things because they just keep running around a very fast loop. There's no audio to them. You can't do that. You just have to keep watching it until you see what's going on. It's not like you can pause it and control it and what have you. And it also shouldn't be under step 7 because it is the same as the steps above. So I'd call that a collision here of different ways of delivery because it's unnecessary and it's inconsistent. If the audience for this is ServiceNow people, and if you have admin rights to ServiceNow, this is more than enough. This is just trying to make it look tricky or more interesting, and I don't think it's a good idea. Also, on this example, what we've got here coming up, I showed you this earlier, simple steps with text, but the big problem here is it's not complete content. So it's horses for courses, which is good. It's content that suits the administrator of a Salesforce system. So they should be able to get away with simple text like this, but these aren't complete. In fact, I know that's not complete because I had to do this exact procedure myself. And there is 15 or 20 other steps in here that you need to do. The other thing I'd point out here is you are combining add and or change here inside of the application. So we've got new and edit. This is both sitting inside of step 4 here, which kind of makes sense. But really, this doesn't describe editing, it describes creation. So separating this out into 2 different sections would serve the user a hell of a lot better. So that's, I think, a small error on this part. But what's really not fair is that it just hasn't covered all of the steps that you need to cover to be able to edit an opportunity stage inside of Salesforce. And I think I've still got that here. This is the same one, but I've redrawn it here. So this might have in it some of the steps that it doesn't even talk about, because you've got to navigate to certain parts of the page and click on little buttons and things, and then move on to this, because obviously you have to reorder the steps in a pipeline. And so what we've tried to do here is describe how to do so in our visual terms. And that isn't covered in the list of instructions that you see inside of here. It may be mentioned, and I don't think it is. Yeah, I can't see it's there, but it certainly isn't clear. So having the appropriate amount of detail also means having the detail, enough detail to finish the job. And in many cases, that isn't the case. This final one here, I think, is also quite interesting. It's how simple is the application? And I'll talk about the risk element in a minute. How simple is the application? If this is let's say, a user-facing, battle-tested, ubiquitous application, it's Facebook or something, and it's what you need to do is give someone access to your account. I don't know, I'm making this up. But it's really simple. It's got 6 steps, and the buttons are, it's really, really simple to navigate because it's super duper UI. Then you can get away with text. You just write a list of instructions. Go to the settings button in the top right-hand corner, or it looks like your face or something. Click on that, find the preferences, and do this. And you can do all that in text, and that's probably even better than doing it in pictures because it's nice and short. Where you really need images is big corporate software applications where there's lots of buttons and switches, and finding the right element can be a challenge. And that's most corporate software applications, quite frankly. That's when they really come into their own. And what's the risk? This is kind of a case of, I suppose, cutting corners. Like if it's a low risk thing, you don't really care that much. I know it's unusual, but it does happen. Then maybe you can just do text and they'll work it out for themselves. But that is unusual, but not impossible. I've only seen it ever a couple of times. And who is it for? I guess this is sort of obvious stuff. But the point I wanted to make around that is that if this is a 3,000 level topic where you really have to know the back and front of SAP or PeopleSoft or Salesforce or whatever you're using, you are obviously a power user if you're going to go anywhere near this. You can assume more knowledge. You can somewhat under-describe how to do things the more advanced a user is in the application itself. If a user is very new to the application or to even operating software in general, it's more unusual than it used to be, but it's still possible, then you've got to probably over-describe how to do certain things. Anyway, long way around of saying some cases you can just use text, and other cases you're going to have to really do great visual instructions. And that leads on to what's the appropriate media. Well, the tools of choice are typically Word and PowerPoint because they're everywhere and we all know how to use them. Video is an attractive thing to do. People get excited about video. Everyone feels good about the video. And trouble is, they're very time consuming to make in most cases. They're very hard to edit in most cases. And it does take a skill set to create a video that maybe most people don't have, but it does take longer than Word and PowerPoint because everyone knows how to do that. If you're watching this, you probably know we've done a lot of work in automating the creation of video instructions that just should be pretty much push button. You make it for Word, you make it for PowerPoint, push another button, you get video. It's almost that easy, but it's still extra work. Now, but the big question is, what's the best for the user? Because if you make a video, the video might run for 10 minutes to describe something, whereas the user just needs some punchy instructions, in which case Word would be better. So video is a really, really interesting one. Probably, and it's bolded here for importance, is HTML. Whether that's HTML on its own website, or whether it's sitting in, let's see, ServiceNow or Confluence or SharePoint or something, HTML is probably the way to go, but it's harder to make, right? It's more difficult to create HTML. I mean, what we do in our own application is we try and automate the creation of really nice looking HTML. But if you're handcrafting it or using one of those little editors inside an environment, It's tricky to make HTML work as well or beautifully as you can create something in Microsoft Word. So my point here on this one is make HTML if you can. Otherwise, go ubiquitous and go Word and PowerPoint because everyone can view those. And if you do have the time and inclination, make video, but you'll probably need to make Word or something else as well. E-learning, if you need to, again, more time consuming again in general. And that's got to go and live in a learning management system. But most of the time, someone's going to tell us what we've got to make. But e-learning, if you have to, yes, the purists in the learning world will say, yep, it's got to be the way to go. We've got to record everything. I'm not puristic about it. My inclination is to say, let's get great content done and shared with the audience. And there are plenty of ways of doing that. You don't have to have a learning management system to do it. All right, next one here is learning preferences and styles. Yes, we as humans, we have a preference for the way that we like to consume knowledge. Mine tends to be linear, so it's Word or it's HTML, so I can flick through it really quickly and find what I'm looking for. Whereas others would like the video and audio that might come together so that they can be more, it's more immersive, perhaps. The reality is you're better off doing one of these things brilliantly than doing 4 or 5 of these learning styles moderately. Yes, in a perfect world, you cover every learning style with every content element you make, but there's never, ever enough time to do that in my experience. So for what it's worth, HTML for the win, but if you need to do other things, please do it. It's got to suit your audience. Next one, do your formalities well. And so this is sort of a grab bag heading for making something beautiful and standardized. The formalities of creating a document. All right, let's have a look at that. This first one here, we have a document. I've got a document to show you. That's not it. It is here. Not this. This is just shortcuts. All right. This is actually a really good document in terms of it communicates what you need to know, step-by-step instructions, good information at the top here. You know who it's from and you know what it's for, and it's broken up into decent sections, and it's got screenshots with some clear instruction on it. Look, it's not my favorite design, but it works. But the initial impression when you hit this document is, oh, because it's not standardized, it's not beautiful, it's not laid out nicely and consistently, but it does the job. So first thing on the list here is first impressions. Putting design and layout and getting consistency through your document really helps the user get comfortable quickly. And that's a large part of what we've got to do is get them engaged with the work that we create so that they get into it more easily and they're not immediately kind of judgmental. This is hesitate to say, I suppose, but they're not judging you before they've got into the content. So along the same lines, use standardized templates, a standardized structure, and standardized language. So just by way of example, let me see what I'm holding here. This run-through instruction document has a title, and it has a table of contents, and it has something called important information in it. Then it has a title for the procedure. Then it has the procedure and some sectioning in it as you go down. Let's just make a Word document. There's nothing here that you couldn't do just in a Word document. I'm just happening to use the tools that are available to me. And so let's just zoom out and have a look at this. So we've got some titling information, a table of contents, some important information, and then we have procedure. So we have document information, we have structure in our document to make it clear what's going on. And we've got some standards. Now, we've got standards around these little headings. We've got standards around the size of the images. We've got standards around the way the pictures and the text work. So this is a standard filled deliverable. And the same would happen if we published it to HTML or somewhere different. So setting up those standards and getting those visual instructions right and consistent is going to make a big difference to the way that the user consumes that information. You know what I might do is might just start from scratch here. I'll just kick that off again, and I'll just a little bit on run-through instruction here. So this is not particularly about run-through instruction. In fact, consciously trying to make this information that you can use even if you're just using Microsoft Word. But I will use an instruction advantage because most of you who are watching this will be run-through instruction customers. So this is the run-through instruction application, our primary application. And those of you who know it know that you start the software to create a new file by double-clicking on this guy on the list here. In my case, it might be Consortia Runthru, but it would be your own brand in your own organization. You double-click on this. But instead of doing that, you can have template files. And if you'd like to learn how to do these, just reach out and we'll send you some instructions. You double-click on them, and it says, for example structure, what theme would you like? And I say Consortia, which sets up colors and branding. And then as it kicks off the application, what it will do is it will bring in a template file. And that template file is the one I chose, and it sets up the structure. So here you would put in your versioning information, so this is version 1.0 or something. And here's the date, and here's the change that was made, and here's the author. So you set up structures so that when you create a new file, you remember to put in this information, the supportive information at the end of the document, and you know where your procedure goes. So it's a structure that starts the document, and you can put your content into it. And you can do exactly the same in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. It's just another thing you can do, standardized structure. The other thing in this area, standardized templates is having the right colors and fonts and what have you. I'm sure you do that already. That's a given. Standardized structure is such as the table I showed you with pictures on the right or left and the content next to it. Get the structure right. And standardized language and text. Now, this is things like press or click. You make a choice. Am I pressing buttons or clicking buttons? What is that language? But it also relates to related text patterns, such as when I'm describing menus. Am I going menu 1, menu 2, menu 3, or am I going, am I doing it like this with an equal sign or something? Standardizing this helps as well. And so having a little set of corporate standards that helps you keep everything the same, because users love that consistency, not just visually, but in terms of the way that we use text and we use language. It will make a big difference to the way that things work. Let's see, what's this? Let's just have a quick, I showed you this one earlier. So in this case here, it's just using these simple greater than symbols to navigate down through the list. Nice and simple. All right, that's the formalities of it. Visual appearance, standardization of templates, and general professionalism. All right, screenshots. When to use screenshots and when to use them smartly and when to not use them. So we've spoken about when to not use them. It's when you don't have to. When do you not have to? When it is text-based, or when it's simple, or when you can assume a whole bag of knowledge that the user has. So in talking to experts, generally, particularly about an area where they have expertise, to be clear, you can just spell it out in text. Job's done, right? Most of the time with corporate applications, you're going to need to put in screenshots. And when you put in screenshots, you can't just put in one or two. You're going to have to put in all of them. Just putting in one or two, I mean, it's just not going to work. You're just going to confuse the user. You've got to put in all of them. Now, what are the good practices of doing this? Size, resolution, and scene. Let's start with resolution. If you're running a modern laptop, you may well be running at a higher resolution and zoom level. What you want to do is plug in another monitor and change the resolution to 1920 1080 and to not have any zoom. There's plenty of assets on the internet to work out how to do that. I won't show you that. But that will help you get an appropriately sized monitor for taking your pictures of your screens. So that's number one. Number two, the size of the image. The size that you're looking at here is 1920 1080. Now it's not that big. Take pictures at this size. That is, doesn't have to be exact, but what I'm saying is if you can bring in the edges of your screen and not lose anything out the right or left, this is the same content, keep it small. And I'll show you why in Runthru. Let me start it again. And I'll also, while Runthru instructions starting, comment on the other thing that was on the list here, which was called setting up the scene. What is the scene? The way that we think about screenshots is you need to take a picture of it as you want the user to do it. You want the user to make these choices and click these buttons. So you set up the scene like a photographer sets up the scene. Let me open a file in my other window. I'll bring it across in a moment. So I set it up so these three checkboxes have to be checked. A choice is made here and some other things. I've now got a Runthru instruction ready, and we'll come into here and we'll take a couple of pictures. So we'll get our snapping tool. The same applies, by the way, if you're just taking pictures using the Windows snipping tool for Word. Same applies. Set up the scene, take a picture. Yeah. Now, I'm going to talk about why we do that in just a minute, but I also want to open it fully 1920 1080 and take another picture. And the reason for that is I want to show you two things, I suppose, at once. One is why I've set up the scene, and the other one is why I've taken a big picture, which I want to point out as a bad idea. So let's mark this up. Here, we're going to use the picture here, use these things, because this is how it should look. And I'm going to say to the user, choose the options as shown here. And I might, if I was being pedantic, type in previous overloaded and lost. I might, but I might not. But I will be pedantic enough to say uncheck those that are not checked here. So something like that to make it absolutely crystal clear. And for double points, we will add another markup element to it around this so we know the user's going to be, their eye will absolutely be drawn to this in our step 15. Now, so that's jumping around a little bit given, but what we've spoken about here is the good practice is setting up the scene. That's where I am. I've said the good practice sets up the scene. Let's talk about the size of the image now. The size of the image, let's talk about that by grabbing this. I've grabbed both those elements and I'm going to paste them onto here. Now, this is exactly the same size on my screen. The word new here and the size of the word new here are the same. But big difference when it comes to publishing. We're talking about steps 15 and 16. Let's go. We'll publish step 15 and 16 and their related screenshots. Now, this is the amount of space that we have available for the screenshot. We have almost half of this A4 or letter size page. And so we get down to step 15 and we'll zoom in so you can see it. Here it is. Step 15. This is the same screenshot as the one below. But because there's a limited amount of space inside of this box in Word or in PowerPoint or wherever they're going to live, you have to do something to the screen. You've got to size the screenshot. And if you size down a screenshot that was this big, it's harder to see the detail. So that's why we say, if you can keep it small, keep it smaller because you get more detail in the output and it makes it easier for the user to see the screenshot because the amount of space that you can paste it into is more limited. That's why we say to do that. And that helps us directly talk about cropping. Yeah, okay. We at Runthru really like screenshots, full-size screenshots, not crop screenshots, not snips of screenshots, because If the user sees a full-size screenshot, they can get a tremendous amount of comfort that they're in the right place. They don't have to work too hard to work out where this little block is. You can see exactly where it is, and you could see that your screen looks like the screen in the document here. Easy. Whereas if you start cropping these screens, it's like, well, where is that? Am I on the right screen in the right place? So, two things. One, smaller screenshots. Two, don't crop them because you get a better result, and this is a better result. Okay, that's not what I wanted to look at. Let's go back to PowerPoint, our slides. All right, overlays. What's an overlay? Well, an overlay might be something like if you had, let's see, we'll just clear these out. Let's put that at 100%. Let me take a little snip of something here and we'll just paste it on top. Frame, paste image. It's going to create a new frame. Oh, yes. Paste from clipboard. And we should get the picture turn up. Here it is. So this might be like you drawing on top of it to show like a pop-up list or something. A really bad idea. Don't do that. It just creates more work for the future. If the screenshot changes, you've got to do it all again. The whole it's just noise that isn't needed. Try and avoid doing that. All right, this one's called red markup confusion. This is about sort of best practices around drawing red circles and rectangles on things. Now, you know, inside of the run-through instruction application, everything's got a number anyway, so you don't have to worry too much about that. But when you're just drawing red circles or rectangles on things, you've got to be careful of this because you've got step 3 here on the configure tab, select additional group by, which is there. And then you've got move one or more fields to the selected list. And it's like, well, I don't know how to do that. So I've got a screenshot here, which is servicing multiple steps. And then there's another screenshot here, which is, it doesn't work, you know. I've never really seen this work. I'm sure you could find occasions where it might sort of work, but avoid kind of just popping red rectangles onto things because it's a good idea. It's not a good idea. We do it because you've got numbers and it makes it easy to follow, but just putting red rectangles on it doesn't make sense. So try and avoid that if you can. If you have to put red rectangles, do multiple screenshots and ideally do numbering, although that's really hard to do unless you've got something where the counting is automatic and reorderable, kind of like our own application, I guess. All right, leveraging formatting images and text. Consistency is really important between the text and the image. You can't have the text say something different to the image. You can't have the text say, click this box if it isn't clicked in the picture. It's just bad karma. Don't do that. So you know those little boxes which are click to accept the terms? Make sure it's clicked in the picture, you know, things like that. You've got to get those right. Let the image do a lot of the work. Look, I think, I really think if this should never say, choose the options as shown in the status section on the left-hand side of the screen, because the screenshot will show you where it is. You let the screenshot do the work, you know. Complete the name fields and make them, you make sure you use the customer's proper name. Using the screenshot to do the work. And if that was what it says, you'd have to fill in the name fields to make it accurate. My other tip there is make sure you fill them in with names that are obviously wrong, so the user doesn't just copy them from your work. Yes, that happens. They just copy directly out of the screen. So you've got to make sure that you make it super clear that it is example only content. Keep your markup neat and close to the subject. If you are drawing these things like little call out boxes, keep them tight. Don't have them hanging halfway across the page. You know, that doesn't help. Just keep it really tight. And in our case, the numbers will turn up. So it saves you having a spaghetti of markup on the screen. Just keep everything close together. If the page gets overwhelmed, create another page, duplicate it and remove some of the content, but mostly just keep things together. Try to show a clear progression of steps. Well, that means probably going 1213, not 1213. You don't want, even though the numbering is really handy, you don't want them having to work too hard by jumping around the screen, even if that is possible, because you could fill out this section, then this section, then this section, then something up here, and something up here. Try and do them in order from the top left in most cases to the bottom right, but have a pattern to it, because then it, again, less cognitive load for the user. And text formatting for directing attention. I mean, basically, if it's a button, you might bold it. You may bold it and make it red, but that's extra work. I've seen people bold things, make them red, and put these little apostrophes around it. I don't like that idea because it's just more work. I think if you just bold it, it's perfect. And if you want to color it, I think that's good on you, no problem at all. That could be quite cool, but it's more work. So bolding is a good idea for important names of objects like buttons because it directs your attention to them in the text. Let's talk about small images. So small images would be things that might turn up in Microsoft Word. So you might want to put a picture of a button or something in here, and that's okay. Usually not necessary, yeah? I mean, if the UI is very tight, very, very small, then that might be useful. And we have our own methods to automate the creation of those. But if you're doing it and you've got a screenshot and you've got an arrow pointing at it, you probably don't need to carve it out, particularly if it's a save button or a cancel button. You probably don't need to do it because it's obvious where it is. Particularly if it's a close button, I'd never do it. You know, it's a close button, right? I mean, it's a little X in the top right-hand corner. You just say close the window and people will know how to do it. If it is if it's something like a little hamburger button that's replicated on the screen, sure, put in a picture, but also tell them where it is. Yeah. So by way of example, let's say it's a little piece of detail. He says looking for a little piece of detail on a screen. Let's say it's a little piece of detail. This will do. This one here, stock status is green one. Let's do this in two ways. We'll do it using two tools, the arrow tool with an orange box, and I'll also do it with this new step 9 here, which doesn't really make sense, does it? Let's make it step 8. And I'm going to say, let me just position that once more. Check this. We'll just call it check this. I know it's a little bit brief, but I just wanted to show you what's going on here. So this is 7, 8, and 9, which is a correct sequence. Let's now publish this out to Word so you can see what I'm talking about. And this is all on the theme of can I find what I'm looking for? And because I need to know what it looks like and I need to know where it is. And so we'll scroll down, find the section that I was talking about. And this is what I did here. So step 7 with the arrow attached to it just points at this section. Very good. Step 8 with the rectangle attached to it carves it out and puts it in here. This little carve out makes sense because I think it connects to where it is on the screens. What is it? Where is it? Help me find it. In this example, stock status is pretty obvious where it is, and it's very clear with step 7. But in some cases, with a really complex screenshot, carving out the picture and showing them where it is, very good idea. But if it's any bigger, if it's a big button or any bigger than that, I just don't see the point in carving it out if you can see the detail in the screenshot already. So that's about when to use small images and not to use them most of the time. It's just extra work and it doesn't really add anything. All right, writing for different software controls. So a software control, a control in software is a technical term meaning something that you interact with, something you click on, something you look at, I guess. Checkboxes, radio buttons, those drop downs and other things. And these two are very, very similar, but the language may be slightly different. And you have to be a bit more careful with checkboxes. Let me explain why. With a little list of checkboxes, here. These are checkboxes. And these checkboxes are a little family, but you can select one or more. That's why they're checkboxes, and they're always mostly rectangular. And so you've got to be clear here. Choose new and previous and overload on new and previous and lost from the status section and deselect the others. You've got to be clear. Whereas if it's a radio button, you can just say choose transfer from the action required list. Because radio buttons, because they change like radio stations, I guess, you can only have one. Whereas this, you can have one or more. So the language you can you got to be really tight with checkboxes, but with radio buttons, you can just say select this item. So it's fast and it's simple and it's clear. With a drop-down list, what's a drop-down list? Also called a combo box in the trade. You can open it up and you can see all your items, and you may even have to scroll. So what's our instruction for that? Our instruction for that is from the list, choose this item. From the list, choose the desired item. You don't say click on it, scroll down until you find what you're looking for, then click on it. Don't do that. Just say choose the item from this list. Job's done. That's it. So that's the language for that. And with searching, mostly don't. You don't need to teach people to search. You may need to tell them to search based on the procedure, but you don't need to search it to show them blow by blow how to do it. You don't need to show them the details of how to do it and choose this and micro search and restrict your search and just don't. No. Search for your desired item. That's about it. And it will appear here. That's about it. Okay. Cascading menus. There is a temptation to try and take a screenshot of cascading menus. This is a cascading menu. No, probably not necessary. 99% of the time, not necessary. It is go to content, organized, super organized, using like little arrows or something in between. That's really what you should be doing for something like a cascading menu. Pictures of menus is just not a great idea. And with text boxes, these are things that you fill in text. It says you've got to say enter your text here, enter the required text here. Here are some rules, but this is where you put in the text. This is mandatory, enter the text here. Be clear about it, but don't overwork it and just point out where the text box is. Now, in many cases, because you're working on a long user interface, you might need to scroll. The user needs to scroll in ServiceNow to find the next thing that they need to do. Well, it doesn't matter what the application is. In general, don't point at the scroll bar and say, here's the scroll bar, click on this a few times to find the next thing. You might say, navigate and find this next section. You may need to navigate this window to do so. You might need to scroll the window to do so. Don't spell it out, click here, or use this little button with a tiny arrow on it in the bottom right-hand corner. Don't do that. They'll work that out. They'll either use the scroll bar on their mouse, the scroll button on their mouse. They'll work it out. The wheel on their mouse. I'm sorry. They'll work it out. So don't over describe this. And grouping. Grouping I touched on. I really like the idea of grouping things where you might say, complete all the name and address fields. Make sure that you're careful about this one. And you point at it, and there's an example there, not here, I know, but there should be. Complete the name and address fields using the accurate name given to you by the customer, That's it. And then you might, for double points, put a rectangle or a circle around it and associate that with the appropriate step, which I'll do here. So that you might want to do. That's grouping together, saves you a ton of time, no disadvantage for the user. So that's writing for different software controls. All right, we're almost there. Two more simple things. This is not the best example I've shown you, not the most representative example I'll show you, but the idea here is show the user the best way, not all the ways. There can be 15 ways of doing something. That's an exaggeration, but there might be 3. Click on this up here, click on it down there, click on it over there, do the same thing. Yeah, well, let's not do that. We're not trying to give them a tour of everything. Let's say this is the best way. Let's say there are other ways of doing it, but this is the best way. Mostly just say, do it like this. And you choose the best way, and then they learn. Rather than adding more time to your work and more time to their work. Yes, puristically, probably not the best thing, but I got to tell you, after decades of writing procedural instructions, I believe it's the best way of doing it. Get them from A to B so they can get on with life. And avoid tours. Like, don't try and jam in adding, subtracting, editing. Here's all the buttons. Let's look at this group of buttons at the top. Let's look at this thing down the bottom here. Isn't that great? That's not procedural training, which is what we're all about. That's a tour, and we don't really want to do tours. So if you're tempted to say, here's, and this is sort of bringing a few things together here. If you're tempted to say, here's a cool cascading menu, I'll show you that, and then I'll show you the menu path, and then I'll show you the transaction code. There are some cases that might be good, but in most cases, it's like, no, no, no. Here's the transaction code, or here's the menu path. But putting the picture as well, there's not a lot of point to that. It just doesn't help with menus. So don't do that. It would be my suggestion. And finally, test your work. I mean, this is really kind of goes without saying, but we don't always do it. When you write it and it's brilliant and you give it to your peers and they think it's great, then give it to a real user and watch. It's the same in the software world. When we write software, you just got to watch someone operate it, and you'll never find the bugs until you do that, or the opportunities for improvement in the system you'll never find until you do it. So that's the 12th one of the most important, but I guess probably the shortest one of all. So, and that's it. Finally, we've covered a fair bit of territory in a short time together today. We're here to help. So if you'd like a hand with creation of procedural assets, be those Word documents or PowerPoint, or putting your HTML into other content systems, we'd be delighted to help. And we also do reviews of people's content to see if we can come with ideas and suggestions for how they might be improved. So I hope this has been of value to you. And if you'd like any assistance, please reach out at runthru.com, either the website or at the email address shown on your screen. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Bye for now.